If you're working past 62 because you feel like you have to, because you feel like stopping working now would be too risky, maybe your number's not there yet, or one more year means more security, I have something to show you. It's not a lifestyle argument. It's not a life is too short speech. I'm going to show you the math. Because what I've found after years of building retirement plans for people in this exact situation is that the case for working past 62 is a little weaker than people assume. And the financial cost for working those last few years is actually a little greater than people realize. Most people have never actually modeled what working longer takes away. They've figured out what working longer adds. They've never penciled out what it's costing them. Today, I want to show you both sides of the ledger, what the numbers actually say for a real hypothetical example, and let you decide what the math actually tells us. And if at any point you want to see how this applies to your situation, there's a link in the description. Feel free to book a call with our team. We look at this stuff every single day. Let's get into it. So our example today is going to be Robert. Robert's a corporate finance director. He's 63 years old. He's still working. He makes $120,000 a year in his job. He's got $1.4 million saved up for retirement between $950,000 in a traditional IRA, $280,000 in a Roth IRA, and $170,000 in a taxable brokerage account. Robert wants to spend $85,000 a year. He's entitled to a Social Security benefit of $2,800 a month if he waits to his full retirement age of 67, and his plan is to work another 2 years. He thinks that 65 is a nice round number, and the 2 years of working, putting more money into the accounts for retirement will just make all the difference in the world. Today, we're going to find out whether that's actually true. So you can see where Robert's coming from here, right? For most people, working past 62 just feels like the right thing to do. If you're not sure whether you have enough saved up to last you the rest of your life, working a couple years longer, putting more money into the accounts over that time period, and also shortening the period of time in retirement where you'll be living off of your savings, off of your investments, it just feels like naturally the right thing to do. It's not irrational at all. In Robert's case, he just wasn't sure what the other options were and even may have felt a little bit of guilt at the concept of retiring before age 65. So the specifics of Robert's plan, if he were to work until 65, would be that he'd retire at 65. $1.4 million that he has saved now would be something larger by then, probably. He puts a little bit more money in the accounts. Hopefully he gets some growth out of that 1.4 plus what he puts in over these next 2 years. So he starts off retirement with something a little bit larger than 1.4 million. He's 65 at that point. He wants to spend $85,000 a year, so he takes money out of his accounts to pay for those expenses. He's probably taking money out of the taxable account first. And then at 67, he files for Social Security. That means that his income gap goes down. He simply needs to take less out of his accounts from that point forward. And what we'll talk about in Robert's situation is that there are 3 specific financial costs that you bear by working longer. Not lifestyle costs or time that could be spent traveling or doing other things, but actual hard dollar financial costs. We're going to go over those 3 today. So let's run these numbers for Robert and compare what working 2 more years adds to what working 2 more years actually takes away. Most people like to calculate what working for another 2 years adds to their portfolio in gross terms, but not how much they get to keep after taxes upon distributions. So the logic of working until 65 instead of 63, like in Robert's case, well, the amount that you have in the portfolio at 63 has another 2 years to grow, which adds to the balance of the portfolio, and you have another 2 years to add more money to it, to the 401k, to the IRA, to other types of deferred accounts, circumstances depending. Well, yes, the gross number gets larger, but that also means that your mandatory distributions when you're in your mid-70s and every year for the rest of your life after that also become larger. And for a lot of people, that feature and the math behind how much we have to take out and when makes a larger tax-deferred portfolio balance actually kind of detrimental. Because when you get to the mandatory distribution years, that might kick you into a higher tax bracket. And on a net-net basis, working 2 more years just to see a larger portfolio balance doesn't work out the way that most people assume. So let's look in more detail at Robert's situation. If he works 2 more years and retires at 65 instead of 63, his intention is to spend $85,000 a year. He works for 2 more years, he collects a few more paychecks, he puts more into the accounts, perhaps the accounts grow by a little bit, and by working 2 more years, his Social Security benefit might go up. It also might not. That depends on the whole history of his earnings throughout his career, and it may or may not impact his ultimate benefit by working a little bit longer. Now, to evaluate Robert's situation on an apples-to-apples basis and compare retiring at 65 versus retiring at 63, we're going to optimize his plan for maximum retirement spending using a Monte Carlo projection. You may have heard of these Monte Carlo projections in the past. What we're going to do in our software here is use the software's big database of history of returns from different asset classes and their correlation to one another. We're going to use Robert's diversified portfolio. We're going to assume that his 1.4 million is saved and invested in a way that's diversified and produces an annual return of 7.25%. Then we're going to instruct the program to run 1,000 different trials with all these different facts and tidbits entered into it. And the result of that analysis is going to tell us in how many of those trials did Robert get to age 95 with some money in the bank, and in how many of these trials did he work his balance down to zero. Now, what we're going to do here is optimize Robert's plan for a result of 80%. If I were Robert, I probably would not want to construct a retirement plan with a 100% quote-unquote chance of success. What that means is that if we plug these details into the program and have it run 1,000 trials, in those 1,000 trials, there wasn't a single one, even in the worst possible circumstances, the worst possible market environment, looking back at the weighty evidence of history, where Robert would have reached age 95 with some money in the bank. And if I'm Robert, that's not terribly desirable, because that means that he has so much power, so much oomph in his retirement plan, he probably could have spent more and enjoyed more of his resources along the way. So in other words, 100% as far as a result in a Monte Carlo analysis is a little bit too conservative. On the other hand, we don't really want to see something, at 50% or less. That's a little bit, a coin flip here isn't the desired result. What we like to do is engineer these plans for about an 80% chance of success. All that means is that in 80% or 800 of these trials, Robert reaches age 95 with some money in the bank, and in 20% or 200 of these trials, based on historical data, historical market returns, he works his assets down to zero. Now, we should not interpret that as a 20% chance that he's going to become destitute. All it means is we have a 20% chance of needing to make some change along the way. So probability of success is a little bit misleading in that regard. Now, based on Robert's initial plan, working until 65, his objective is to spend $85,000 a year. Well, if we're optimizing for retirement income, what I'm seeing when I put these details into the program is if we're optimizing for an 80% chance of success, Robert can probably spend a little bit more and work his way all the way up to $95,000 per year and still wind up with an 80% chance of success based on the Monte Carlo analysis. So let's compare that to retiring at 63 instead of working those 2 additional years. So if instead Robert decides to retire now, that means that he has 2 more years where he's drawing money out of the portfolio. He has 2 fewer years of growth before he starts doing so. He has 2 fewer years where he's making contributions to the portfolio. So we should expect that the numbers are going to fall, right? So based on this method of analysis, if we optimize his retirement plan for retirement income and adjust the variables to where Robert is retiring at 63 instead of 65, in order to get to 80%, it looks to me like Robert can spend about $87,000 per year instead of $95,000. That's still above his baseline objective, but it's clearly less than the $95,000. Now, the caveat that I want to add is all we've done so far is adjusted the retirement timeline. We haven't used that window between 63 and 65, this window of opportunity, for any kind of tax planning or other strategies yet. So with that in mind, if Robert does retire at 63 and he decides to spend $87,000 a year, he's probably going to want to take the money out of his taxable investment account first, right? He'll take money out of his taxable investment account first, then he'll take money out of the tax deferred account. He'll start collecting Social Security at 67, which reduces his income gap. Social Security comes in. It just means that he needs to take less out of his account at that point. So if he foregoes his income because he steps into retirement starting at 63 instead of 65, we have this 2-year window where he's going to have substantially less income coming in. That's an opportunity for Roth conversions. So Robert might choose to do some Roth conversions in these years where his income is lower. And again, his income is lower because he's not working and he's taking money out of his taxable investment account in order to pay his expenses. At some point, that investment account will be depleted and he'll start taking money out of his IRA instead. When he takes money out of the IRA instead, every penny is added to his tax return. It counts as taxable income. So he'll pay tax on the distributions from his IRA, and he'll have less latitude to do these Roth conversions at lower tax brackets at that time. So what we're going to do now is assume that Robert proceeds with Roth conversions in these first few years of retirement between 63 and 65, when he's paying for his expenses by taking money out of his taxable brokerage account. We'll assume that he'll convert money from his traditional IRA to his Roth IRA in a way that fills up the 12% tax bracket during those years. Now, if he proceeds with that plan of retiring at 65 and then pushing through Roth conversions in the first couple of years, it doesn't impact the amount that he can spend in order to get to an 80% chance of success via the Monte Carlo analysis by all that much. So it really doesn't impact his maximum retirement spending by all that much. What it does is gives him a lot more flexibility 10, 20, and 30 years down the road. It also has a small impact on the size of his portfolio at various milestone ages. So if Robert goes with his initial plan and works until 65 and then retires, his portfolio balance at age 75 across all his accounts will be $1,934,592. And at age 85, the total balance will be up to $2,210,959. If instead he retires at 63 and doesn't continue to work, his portfolio balance at age 75 will be a little bit lower, $1,603,442. And at age 85, $1,809,165. Now, all this is on a gross basis before taxes, and I have to add, we're using average annual returns to produce these projections. There's going to be a wide dispersion of potential results for Robert. His portfolio value at age 75 and 85 might be a lot greater than those figures. It might be a lot lower than those figures. It's based on how the market actually performs over this time period. So the net impact of working 2 more years is a little smaller than Robert assumed. Yes, his portfolio balance would be larger by working another 2 years, but it doesn't impact his maximum potential retirement spending by that much. In either scenario, he's above his objective of $85,000, and by working 2 more years, that only produces an extra $8,000 per year of potential retirement spending. But that's only the first cost. The second cost is the one that nobody really sees coming. Now, if Robert decides to continue working until 65, he closes a window of tax planning opportunity. If he retires at 63, he'll have a couple years where he's meeting his living expense needs by taking money out of his taxable account. And he'll find himself in a pretty low tax bracket, which he can use for Roth conversions and other things. If he works until 65, yes, he's adding a little bit to the portfolio balances. He's shortening the length of his retirement. He's maybe putting more money in the form of new contributions to his portfolio on top of potential market growth, which would bump up the values. But he's missing an opportunity because if that earned income comes in over those 2 years, remember, he's making $120,000 a year. And that pushes him into the 22% bracket if he's filing as a single person. That level of taxable income means that he won't have an opportunity to harvest gains, long-term capital gains in his taxable account at 0%. That opportunity is gone. He won't have an opportunity to do any Roth conversions at a lower tax bracket because 22% is a little bit higher than the level at which he would want to convert. And he's setting his Medicare premiums during this period for the time he's going to retire. Remember, your Medicare premiums will probably begin at age 65 when you're eligible. It's assuming you're not still working at that point. And the amount you pay depends on your income from 2 years ago, not the income from your previous year. The reason here is we have this Medicare premium surcharge, or IRMAA, income related monthly adjustment amount. The amount we pay for Medicare depends on our income. And the amount of Robert's income here in 2026 is going to impact his Medicare premium when he's 65 in 2028. The reason is that Robert is not going to need to report his 2026 income on his tax return until April 15th of 2027. And his 2027 income until April 15th of 2028. And he can even extend his tax return all the way up until October 15th if he wants to. So when he turns 65, whether he's working or not, Medicare is going to want to start charging him a monthly premium at the very beginning of the year. But he's not even able to file his tax return until the beginning of February based on our tax cycle. So Medicare premium surcharges have a 2-year look-back period, and this year, 2026, his income from this year is going to determine what he pays for Medicare starting in 2028 when he's 65. So these three concepts do detract from the benefit of working longer, right? Working longer, we're thinking about giving our assets more time to grow, more paychecks, more contributions to the account, shorter retirement. Those are all good things for our retirement plan, but we're also missing out on some opportunities. Those are costs. And the opportunities are the ability to harvest long-term gains at 0%, Medicare premium surcharges that we might be setting in place through these 2 years of extra income, and the missed opportunity for Roth conversions. Now, these costs might not outweigh the benefits of working the extra 2 years given your personal circumstances, but let's look at what they are for Robert. So we're going to assume here that the Medicare premium surcharges apply to Part B and Part D of Medicare, which is accurate. Robert might decide that he wants more coverage on top of that. Most people do by either enrolling in a Medicare Advantage plan or a supplemental Medigap policy. Now, these income-related monthly adjustment amounts, the extra amount you have to pay for Medicare, they don't apply to Parts A or C, your Medigap policy. They only apply to Part B and Part D. So this year, the base monthly premium for Medicare is $202.90 per person for Part B. For Part D, it depends on the plan that you choose and what your insurer is costing you. For most people, it's around $30 a month. So if Robert works in the years in which he's 63 and 64, his income is going to push him into the tiers that subject him to that monthly adjustment amount when he's 65 and 66. So remember, the income from his year 63 impacts his Medicare premiums in year 65. Income from year 64 impacts his premiums when he's 66. So if he continues making $120,000 a year, that means he'll be in this first Medicare premium surcharge tier and have to pay an extra $81.40 a month for Part B and an extra $14.50 for Part D for those 2 years. So just out of the gate, if you do the math on this, by working these extra 2 years, he's adding to his tax bill in the years in which he's 65 and 66 by a total of $2,296.80. And that's just because he falls into the first tier of premium surcharges. So the window is closing for Robert if he makes the decision to continue working. He doesn't have the ability to do these conversions during the low income years, and he's setting himself up for 2 years of Medicare premium surcharges. It's the third cost that reframes the entire decision. Now, if you're watching this and you're wondering whether in your situation, staying 2 years actually provides the benefit that you're expecting, or whether it would be actually more costly than you think, that's the kind of stuff that my team and I do all day, every day. There's a link in the description. Feel free to click it and book a call with us. We're happy to chat about your personal situation and how this might affect you. Now, the other way that we like to look at this, that financial planners like me like to put our finger on occasionally, is the funded ratio. The funded ratio is if we take the total portfolio balance and divide it by the present value of future expenses not covered by guaranteed income. So for example, if Robert were going to work until 65 and we're planning for a 30-year retirement from that point, meaning that the terminal age would be age 95, we take 30 years of his expenses and we'd adjust the last 28 for the Social Security benefit. So in other words, he retires at 65, he takes out $95,000 a year in the years he's 65 and 66. Well, when he's 67 and from that point forward, he'll only need to take a little bit less out of his accounts because Social Security will be providing a $2,800 per month benefit. So if we take this total portfolio value, we divide it by the present value of all those expenses not covered by guaranteed income, I get 128%. So his retirement is still reasonably funded. Now, that being said, that doesn't protect Robert necessarily from down markets in retirement. That doesn't incorporate any volatility into the sequence of his returns. So we don't like to create retirement plans that result in a funded ratio of exactly 100%. We like to be above that mark because we know the stock market is going to have good years and bad years across a 20 or 30 or longer years of retirement. Now, on the other hand, if Robert decides to retire at 63, he'll have a lower funded ratio. He'll have 2 fewer years of that compound growth of his investments, 2 fewer years of making contributions, and 2 more years of taking money out of the accounts. That being said, when I do the math on Robert's retirement plan as if he retired this year at age 63, he still has a funded ratio of 121%. So yeah, it's less than if he works another 2 years, but that's still a comfortable place to be. So for Robert, he's already in a good enough position, right? His funded ratio today is at an adequate point. His Monte Carlo analysis with the optimization feature tells me that he can take out more, spend a little bit more every year than his initial target. He's already in a good place. Now, it might make him feel more comfortable, more confident to work another couple of years, but the cost from the way that I see it is in his time and his energy and his flexibility, right? He can take those 2 years and go travel and go enjoy himself and relax a little bit more and do some tax planning kind of stuff that puts more of his assets in the Roth bucket, which simply gives him more flexibility today in terms of time and more flexibility down the road in terms of which account he decides to take distributions from 10, 20, 30 years down the road and beyond. So let me put the full picture together for you for Robert, and let me show you what the math actually says. So on the one hand, we've got Robert working until 65. He can spend $95,000 a year. If he does that, his funded ratio is 120%. He has an 80% chance of success based on our Monte Carlo projection. He has a larger portfolio balance, but he's also going to be paying $2,300 more for Medicare over these first few years because of the monthly premium surcharges, and he's missed this tax valley, this 2 years, which would have enabled him to shovel more money from his IRA into his Roth. On the other hand, if Robert decides to retire now at 63, he's still in very good shape. He can spend more than his target, $87,000 per year, which is more than the $85,000 he had tabbed with. His funded ratio is 120%, with an 80% chance of success based on our Monte Carlo projection. He can use these 2 years strategically for tax planning purposes. He avoids Medicare premium surcharges in the first couple of years of his retirement. And if we're looking 10, 20 years down the road, his portfolio balances will likely be a little bit smaller by retiring at 63. But he'll probably also have more flexibility because a larger portion of his accounts will be in the Roth bucket. So the math supports either of these options or something in between if that makes more logistical sense for him. What I'd like to point out is that these extra 2 years of working, they don't actually provide a whole lot of extra security. They simply provide the feeling of security, because the longer that we work, the longer that we're retaining an income, that just feels more secure. And for a lot of people, it's only done because we're delaying that uncomfortable jump off point between collecting a paycheck and using that paycheck to pay our expenses and then paying those expenses by taking money out of our accounts. That's an uncomfortable feeling for anybody. In this case, the math supports 63 or 65. At the end of the day, it might make the most sense for Robert in his career to work until 65 because maybe it takes a couple of years for his organization to find a replacement. He cares about his colleagues. There are a million reasons that he might want to continue working to 65. But I would like to point out that in this case, the math supports either one. The money will come and go over time, but the years lost are irreplaceable. So here's the bottom line. Working past 62 always seems like the more secure, the safer, the more rational move. But when you actually pencil it out, incorporate the missed tax planning opportunities, the Medicare premium surcharges, and you look at the actual after-tax math, the situation is a little bit murkier. You might be putting yourself in a stronger financial situation, but there are most certainly costs to working into your mid-60s and beyond. In Robert's case, the plan already worked by retiring at 63. Working until 65 didn't necessarily add a whole lot of financial security, it just added the feeling of it. Now, if you're watching this and you're starting to wonder whether your own plan already works, whether you have enough saved up already to step into retirement, I created a video that specifically goes over the signs I look for when someone sits across from me and asks, am I already ready to retire? Some of them don't have anything to do with your balance at all. So I'll cue that one up. I would suggest watching that one next.